Are you having trouble with ghosts coming out of your screen, preventing you from watching a full-length horror movie syllabus video? Well, I might have the remedy for you. Join us for this recap of our video about the J-horror subgenre, and then stick around for a deeper cut doctorate level selection. Oh, and if there's a ghost coming out of your screen right now, try shutting off the monitor. Maybe just cut them right in half. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out our introduction video. There's a link to that in the description below. It'll give you an idea of what the Horror Movie Syllabus is about, but in short, we take a look at a particular subgenre of horror and then look at 3 movies from that subgenre. Today, we're going back and looking at a video that we already did, a video on the subgenre of J-horror. We're going to recap the movies we talked about there and then add on a 4th doctorate level selection for those longtime viewers that saw the previous video. But if you didn't see the previous video, we explored the J-horror phenomenon, the craze of J-horror when it hit the US, and how it felt so fresh and original, something that the general public was kind of starved for. This was, right on the heels of the what I call like the dark period of horror, where it seemed like things were getting really monotonous and repetitive. And then you had Scream reinvigorating the slasher subgenre, and then J-horror coming in, giving a whole new fresh take on horror that for Americans felt very original. The J-horror phenomenon was really huge, but it didn't last for a particularly long amount of time. And while we still see J-horror movies coming out now, the craze for it, or the buzz for it, the originality of it, seems to have died down. It's now no longer feeling fresh, but they still have a lot of quality movies coming out. And we talked about a lot of them on the video. If you missed that video, we're going to recap the J-horror movies that we talked about in that video and talk a little bit about why we had selected them for the syllabus. And we're going to go ahead and start that recap right now. The first J-horror movie we talked about was Ringu. And Ringu is the Japanese version, the original Japanese version of the American movie The Ring. And it's about a cursed videotape that if you watch it 7 days later, you die. And we talked about how the popularity of the American version encouraged me to seek out the original Japanese version, which was a happy byproduct of the J-horror craze. It encouraged Americans to seek out international horror, in specific Japanese horror, and kind of just broaden our minds a little bit, and kind of learn a little bit about the cultural differences and the different kind of things that make things scary in other cultures. And this was a great entryway into it. The Ring was a very accessible movie, and a lot of people really liked the American version. And the Japanese version was just a bleaker, darker version of that. So if you like dark stuff, the original version, Ringu, is probably something you should be checking out. The second movie we talked about was Battle Royale. Battle Royale is a movie about a group of Japanese students who are put on an island, given weapons, and forced to fight to the death, so there can only be one person left standing at the end of it. It sounds familiar probably because it's basically the plot of The Hunger Games. And we talked a lot about how The Hunger Games owes a significant debt to Battle Royale, but how Battle Royale is definitely more violent, more gory, a lot more intense than Hunger Games, but also has a dark sense of humor as well. It's definitely something that if you like the concept of Hunger Games, you'll like Battle Royale as well, but buckle up because it's a lot more intense and a lot more horrific than the Hunger Games movies were, and definitely something you should check out. And the last J-horror movie we talked about is Audition, a movie by acclaimed Japanese director Takashi Miike, and it's probably one of his most famous films. It's the story of a man who uses a pretense of having an audition for a movie to try to find his ideal mate, his ideal wife. And he finds a woman that seems ideally suited to him, but she is not what she seems to be. The movie is notorious for how dark and graphic and gruesome it is, although I would say it's nowhere near as gruesome as some of Miike's other works. But the more interesting thing that we talked about in the video was how a large part of the first part of the movie comes off as almost like a romantic movie, like almost a romantic comedy or a romantic drama, and then suddenly veers into a very bizarre, very unsettling horror movie. It's not for the weak of heart. It's not going to be for everybody, but it's almost, I dare say, a masterpiece. So if you haven't seen Audition, consider watching that one. So that's our recap of the J-horror movies we selected for the syllabus. But now let's get into our fourth doctorate level selection, a little bit deeper cut for J-horror. Our doctorate level selection for the J-horror subgenre is Spiral. And Spiral, also known as Uzumaki in Japanese, is a 2005 horror movie based on a Japanese manga book of the same name written by Junji Ito. And it is utterly bizarre, utterly fascinating, and a wild trip of a ride. Quite the experience that you're probably not going to be prepared for. If you've never seen it, the movie is about a small town that is plagued by a mysterious curse having to do with spiral shapes, just the shape of a spiral. It starts small with one man getting obsessed with it, and then it starts to spread, where it starts to permeate everybody's psyche and drives everybody slowly insane as everybody gets obsessed with or afraid of spiral shapes. And you never realize how many things are spiral shaped until you watch this movie. It's a little bit harder to explain than that, but I wouldn't want to explain more anyways because I wouldn't want to spoil it for anybody. But suffice to say, Spiral is a bizarre ride of a movie. Like I mentioned, it's based on a Japanese manga called Uzumaki Spiral, and Junji Ito, the creator of the manga, explained how the idea came to him when he was drawing houses for a comic and kind of was spiraling them to fit them into the page, and the idea spun out from there. Uh, Ito is known for making his books more visually arresting and maybe not focusing quite as much on story. And I'd say that the movie follows suit. It is a visually striking movie. It is absolutely fascinating. There's so much interesting stuff going on the screen. And again, the fact that it's weird and strange makes sense because it's based on the manga, but it's not the most narratively straight film in the world. It's a very strange narrative. It's a very muddy narrative, and the not only is the story not 100% clear, but the themes aren't super clear either. It has a wonderful sense of dread, but there's not a tremendous amount of payoff. By the time you get to the end of the movie, you'll be kind of left wondering what it is you watch. You won't really have that satisfying resolution or explanation of what the curse is about and why it was affecting people the way it was affecting them. And to a degree, that's okay if you can get comfortable with that lack of resolution. I know that there are people that really feel like they need to have everything kind of wrapped up in a tidy little bow, and Uzumaki Spiral does not really do that. It's really more style over substance, and again, that's by design. The director of the movie, who's not the same person who wrote the book, talked about that a little bit, wanting to have a broad international appeal, crossover appeal. So the story, and by extension the dialogue, etc., is not as important as how it looks and how it makes you feel. And in that sense, I think he was very successful. I think the movie does have a very unsettling, strange feeling, but it also just has this really bizarre sensibility that will leave you puzzled, kind of scratching your head, trying to solve a mystery that's not really going to be solved. And I don't know which one weighs heavier. I don't know if the strange, crazy, dreadful, bizarre imagery is enough to supersede the questioning WTF aspect of the movie. I lean towards yes because I enjoyed the movie quite a bit. It felt almost like a Japanese version of a David Lynch film, but really not quite on that level. I love me some David Lynch. We'll talk about that in the future. This movie doesn't quite scratch that, but the same kind of sensibility where narrative is definitely secondary or maybe even tertiary to mood and tone. And I can appreciate that, and I appreciated that in this movie. But if you're looking for a straight narrative, if you're looking for explanations, this movie's going to frustrate you a bit. I haven't read the manga yet, and I'm tempted to do so to see if I can get a little bit more understanding of what's going on. Maybe if I can understand from the cultural aspect of where it's coming from, maybe that'll shed a little light on it. But I'm also a little reluctant to read it as well because I know that the movie kind of goes off in a different direction than the novel or the book, and so I don't know if that'll actually help the experience or hurt the experience of the movie. But I honestly, curiosity will get the best of me, and from what I understand, Ito is a fantastic artist slash writer. The other book that he's really famous for is a book called Tommy, which I believe also has a movie adaptation, but I haven't seen it. But I like comic books. I am interested in this story and this concept, and so I'd like to explore more to it. So I would probably wind up picking up those books at some point in time. But the movie by itself is a ride. It's a very strange, bizarre, unsettling, and slightly comedic movie, and you owe it to yourself to check it out if that's kind of your bag. But if you really need a straight narrative, maybe this is not going to be for you. I would say check it out, give it a chance, try to embrace it a little bit, but know what you're getting yourself into. Know that you're getting yourself into a bit of a strange, upside down, spirally movie that is not going to make a tremendous amount of sense. And just try to like experience it, let it wash over you, let it kind of flow over you. I think that's probably the best way to experience Spiral Uzumaki. And I think if you have that knowledge going in, you're much more likely to have a good time with it. So that's Spiral for you. If you do decide to check it out, let me know what you think. But if you've seen it already, give me your thoughts on it down below. Do you have a stronger opinion positively or negatively about it? Do you think it's as weird as I do, or do you totally get it? If you get it, explain it down in the comments below for the rest of us. But Spiral, it's an enigma, it's a cipher, but I really enjoy it. So that's our doctorate level selection for the J-horror subgenre, but I'm also throwing in a extra credit movie because, well, frankly, why not? I love me some J-horror, and there's a lot of good ones to talk about. The extra credit movie I want to talk about is called Carved, The Slit-Mouthed Woman. And Carved came out in 2007 and is kind of a Japanese slasher movie based on a Japanese urban legend, if you will. And it's absolutely fantastic. I really enjoy it, even though apparently I'm a little bit in the minority, but we'll get into that. I can't recommend it enough, though. If you like slasher movies, if you like creepy stuff, Carved is one for you to check out. But if you haven't seen it, the movie is about a teacher at a elementary school where kids start going missing, and she and a colleague of hers decide to start investigating and trying to find out what is happening to these kids. Meanwhile, some of the kid witnesses, are talking about a slit-mouthed woman who is supposedly the one snatching up these children. A woman with a scar running across her face, a terrifying looking scar. And as they investigate this mystery, stories come out, things come out, mysteries come out that are very unsettling. And I won't say any more than that because I don't want to spoil the movie for you. But Carved is another ride, but a totally different ride from Spiral. It's definitely much more straightforward, even though it's still dealing with paranormal supernatural activity. It's definitely a much more clear narrative, something that makes a lot more sense and is a lot more easy to follow. Like I said, it's basically a Japanese slasher film, although it's really arguably more of a thriller than a slasher, except for the fact that it's got some pretty solid gore and graphic effects in there. But there's a large focus on the mystery being solved to its benefit, because it's an interesting mystery and it's based on this Japanese urban legend of the slit-mouthed woman, this woman who had been cut in her face by her mate and was out seeking revenge. And it kind of takes that general concept and runs with it a bit, and to great aplomb. It really is a very effective movie, in no small part because of that character design of the slit-mouthed woman. It's definitely creepy and unsettling. Seeing her and how she looks, absolutely terrifying. And the fact that she's sort of a ghost, sort of supernatural, and I don't want to get too into the details of it because I don't want to spoil. But that makes her even more creepy because it's not like you can just punch her in the face or wrestle her around. Like there's an aspect to it that is makes it more unsettling because you couldn't just easily fight her off. And I like that. I like this kind of supernatural horror slasher movie. She fits in right there with like, a Michael Myers or a Jason or a Freddy. Maybe not quite as iconic as those slasher icons, but the idea or the design of her really does fit as well as those and hits as hard as those. For some reason, this movie is not as popular as I think it should be. The reviews of it are fairly lukewarm. People aren't super enthused about it. Critics aren't super enthused about it. I'm not really sure why that is. It does tackle some strong themes of child abuse and neglect and stuff like that are pretty heavy for a movie that is really kind of like a schlocky slasher movie. It's kind of got some ambition in that regard, but I think that just makes the movie better. I think it gives it a weight and an importance that the average slasher doesn't have. So I can see why people would be uncomfortable about that in their kind of popcorn horror movie, but I disagree. I think it is a big asset to the movie, and I think the movie is a tremendous amount of fun. The acting's pretty solid across the board. Again, the look of the movie is absolutely fantastic. It moves at a good clip. I think it's made very, very well. And I can't be the only one because they did make a prequel to it. Now, I haven't seen the prequel yet. And there's a part of me that's a little bit reluctant to do so because prequels so often don't hit the mark. You know, they don't really have the open-endedness of a story where you don't know what's going to happen and therefore you're really curious to see how it ends. A prequel kind of is constrained by the fact that it's a prequel and then the events of the original movie have to follow after it. And so that may not be a great experience. On the other hand, if it explains a little bit more about the history of the Slit-Mouthed woman or the urban legend, the origin of that, I could be up for that because again, I like learning about these cultural differences, these different cultural fears from other countries in international horror. So that's always a boon as far as I'm concerned. So I'll probably break down and watch the prequel as well because I really liked the original, frankly. So Carved, the Slit-Mouthed Woman, great title, great movie in my opinion. Maybe it's not for everybody. If you've seen it and you didn't like it, let us know why because I honestly can't quite figure it out. But if you haven't seen it, if this is your kind of movie, definitely check it out because I found this one to be very, very enjoyable. I was pretty high on it, and I almost put this as the Doctorate Level selection, even though Uzumaki had a better reputation because I enjoyed it that much. So check out Carved. So that's going to do it for our Doctorate Level exploration into the J-horror subgenre. As you know, I like these movies. If you haven't seen the original video, check it out so you can see a little bit more about how we talked about J-horror in general and the original 3 movies that we talked about. I'll get a little bit more in depth in that video. But for now, it's time to get into our horror trivia pursuit and answer our horror trivia question live on the air and see if I can answer it. And so today we're going to look at the international category from the Trivia Pursuit card because, you know, J-horror. And the question today is, in 2014's Goodnight Mommy, which of the twin brothers is revealed to be dead? Elias or Lucas? So, first I'm a little annoyed because that's a total spoiler. If you have not seen that movie, that sucks. That just got spoiled for you. And I literally was halfway through reading that question before I even realized that. So sorry for anybody who got spoiled on that one. But if you haven't seen Goodnight Mommy, you should absolutely see Goodnight Mommy. It's a great movie. We've covered it already on the Horror Movie Syllabus. So check out that video if you haven't seen it yet. But the movie is fantastic. And that's, you know, the big twist of the movie is that one of the twins is dead. And I'll be honest, before you even reading this card, I wouldn't have even remembered the names. Elias or Lucas. I would not have remembered the names. And so that is the thing. Like, if I don't remember the names at all, I certainly don't remember the name of the one that was dead. And I'm going to be guessing, but I've got a 50-50 shot, right? The thing is, my guesses have sucked lately. I have been on a losing streak, and it's not great. So I do have a 50-50 shot. And here's the thing. The gut is saying Elias. The gut's saying Elias, but my gut has been my enemy lately. It's been betraying me. So I'm inclined to disregard my gut and go with Lucas. And I, you know, kind of prattling on a little bit to give you a chance to come up with your guess. Either you know this or you're guessing. And, you know, it's a one or the other. So I'm going to defy the gut, and I'm going to say Lucas is the dead one. Let's see what the answer is. It's Lucas. My gut sucks, but I outsmarted it today. Lucas is the dead one. Did you get Lucas? Did you answer that correctly? And yet again, you had a 50-50 shot. So this is one of those ones where wrong answers don't really amuse me unless you really pick somebody other than Elias or Lucas, in which case, explain yourself in the comments below. But did you get that question? Let me know if you got it right or wrong. Thank you again for hanging out and enjoying another Horror Movie Syllabus video. This one is, of course, our little Cliff Notes version to catch you up on J-horror. And let me know what your Doctorate Level selection would be for J-horror. You got any deep cut, stranger movies, Japanese horror movies that maybe I haven't heard of? Drop that in the comments below as well. And we'll add it to the to watch list if I haven't seen it before. But for now, I'll just go ahead and wrap up by saying, class dismissed.